We'll go ahead and call this meeting to order. It's 5:31 p.m. This meeting has been advertised according to Oklahoma laws. To begin, we'll do a roll call, and it looks like everyone is here. Appreciate all the council being here tonight. I'll go ahead and give the prayer tonight, and then following that prayer, if you'll join with me and recite the Pledge of Allegiance. Our dear Heavenly Father, we come before Thee this night. We're grateful for the many blessings that Thou hast given us, and grateful for this opportunity we have to meet as a council and also citizens of the community. We're grateful for the blessings that we enjoy here in Roosevelt, Utah. We're grateful for those that work so hard to make this a good place to live, for staff, for our police and fire departments, for those community members that participate and volunteer time to provide recreational opportunities for us and also provide service for our community. We ask that Thy Spirit will be with us tonight, that it will guide and direct us in our decisions, and we might have the best outcomes. We're grateful for all things, and this we pray in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. We have the minutes from August 3rd in front of us. Are there any amendments or corrections that need to be made to those minutes? Seeing none, would you entertain a motion to approve?
I'll make that motion to approve.
A second. We have a motion and a second. You got those? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. We also have our comment period at the beginning of each meeting. Are there any in the audience that would like to take opportunity to speak with the council up to 3 minutes? Seeing none, we'll move forward with the first agenda item, which is the Effluent Water Purchase Agreement. And Ryan, did you want to talk about this, or Josh? Who's?
So the effluent water purchase agreement came due this year. It's through Finley Resources. When you look at the one that you have, just so you don't get confused, they have UNO wax operating in there. That's what they needed in there. So the original, it's pretty similar to the original contract that they had in the previous years. We just updated it. This one, we actually, a couple of the new things, the price is the same. It's still at $302 per 1,000. Are you guys familiar with what we're doing? Maybe I ought to give you a little. Okay, so Finley Resources is pumping out of the lower sewer pond for frac water. It's been tested by the state. We got everything up to speed there, so we're good to go. And so that's what they're doing. And they do have a frac coming up August 25th. All right. Yeah. So yeah, that's the next one. They're planning on taking about a foot off the level of the pond. So anyway, probably the best way we can use that water is by doing what we're doing. Some of the things we added is compensating the sewer farm losses to the farmer. If we have to shut down the farm so we have enough water for the frac, we can make it up to the farmer. This year, we don't expect to do that. We feel like there's enough water in that lower pond to just make everybody whole. So we're not concerned there. The term, I believe, Grant, help me here on this, it's 3 years. In this one, it's 3 years. Was it just a year to year before? So we did update that to at least every 3 years. And other than that, most of it's been pretty much the same. Have you guys had a chance to look through it? Any questions?
The only question I had when we were discussing it is how much water was available? You said just a foot?
Well, that's what they're gonna take. We're at 9.5 feet right now in the level, and we're able to take it down to 6 feet.
6.
Then they're gonna need 1 foot. So, and we believe the farmer needs what, 1 more foot?
At least.
So we should be above that 6 foot.
How many acres is that pond? Just curious. That little pond.
50 acre.
50 acre?
Yeah.
So we have quite a bit of water in there.
The circumference of it's 55 acre, but as it tapers down, what's usable is 50.
Okay.
They're probably gonna take 500,000 barrels.
Yeah.
That's quite a bit of water, but.
Can you give us a gallon? I'm just kidding. When we were drawing the contract, some people are talking in barrels, we're talking in gallons, some people are talking in acre feet. And
Just times that out.
I was just curious on where we arrived at the price. That's just the going rate. I mean, I don't really care. I was just curious where it came from.
That's the price that was set there before with previous managers, and we felt that it was a decent price that we should. It's a little more than what we're doing with the other water.
Our culinary rates are, or our secondary water rate is $1 per thousand, isn't it?
Correct.
So 3 times that.
Yeah,
For us, it's pretty
and some of this water we already sold. You do the math.
So,
How often do you have to test this water quality? You mentioned you passed all the state tests. Is there like a?
That's a question for Kirby, yeah.
Only when the effluent is being put on the field, on land application, so when we're irrigating, we have to test it.
Test it at the
But
time?
yeah, when there's no effluent in the winter, we do not. We still turn in the report, but we just put on no effluent. Because it's not going out of the ponds, it's just,
And we do that every month.
yes, monthly.
Does this contract require testing regularly, even in the wintertime? It uses everyone, no, okay.
In fact, it expressly says that, explain where the water's coming from and saying it's their responsibility once it leaves the pond. Whether it was to somehow contaminate a third party, it's still their responsibility.
Saw that in provision 2.5. Thought that was good.
any other questions?
The other thing I would point out is that it's the efficient operation of the sewer system takes precedent, and so if we ever need to cut it off, we can.
So just before we make a motion, I just gotta let everyone know that this is, for me, conflict of interest if it's Finley, because I've worked with them on the other side of permitting for my job, so.
Mayor, you do have the original there, so that's the one that will be signed.
So we just need a motion to approve.
Unless there's any other questions,
I move we approve.
I'll second. Okay, we have a motion by Councilman Martin, second by Councilman Allen. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion passed.
Abstention.
All right. Next item, North Crescent Development and Water Connection Discussions. Looks like we have Jeff. Were you going to do that or Eric? Eric Rock Scissors?
I'm just so dusty, I have to run home and shower.
Well, I should have, but I didn't.
Well, let me give just a quick background on this North Crescent area. I know this has been looked at for a little while now, and it's kind of come from an influx of folks wanting to get water connections out there, and also a couple developers that have come to the city wanting to connect on in that area. So maybe just some quick background, and definitely Kirby and Ryan can correct me if I say anything wrong here. So on the map there, that kind of starting at the top on the north side, those red lines are Cedar View Montwell's existing lines. And just off the page on the left would be where their tank is off of the Neola Highway. So it kind of puts in context. They're drawing water from Roosevelt main line on the Neola Highway through their tank, and then it comes and feeds that area of their system. And then, I can't remember what year it was. What year did you guys connect on with that PRB? Maybe it doesn't matter a whole lot, but it's not
I think it was 16, 17.
2016. I was gonna say probably 5 or 6 years now. Some of the North Crescent problems and also some of Cedar View Montwell's problems with the 8-inch line that they installed and it being stagnant. That connection was made and there's an agreement set up that you can they'll draw water and then Roosevelt's able to take water back from their system and that keeps their water flowing right through that area. So because they're on a different pressure zone, there's also a pressure reducing valve, a PRV, right there where Ryan's hand's at. And that's also a pressure sustaining valve that doesn't allow the folks in Cedar View's district to get depleted in pressure if there was more draw from the Roosevelt system. So the valve will shut down if their pressures drop below a set amount, and I think it's around 50 psi. So that valve is a little bit of a limiting factor, but it allows that pressure difference to happen, and then it supplies water to this North Crescent area. I think when that was originally talked about and designed, it was recommended to have a PRV up there, and then also a pressure reducing valve down on the south end by 1000 South on State Street, so that could be kind of its own zone. Because if currently there's a valve closed there, if you open that valve, you would actually run a lot of water through Cedar View's tank. That would be the route that would feed a lot of that north part of town. So that valve was closed so that, it didn't deplete Cedar View's system. So, kind of the full build out would be to put a PRV there at 1000 North so that it would let some water through in that area, but not a large amount. So some of the problems that have come up or some of the issues, I guess, in this area are mainly fire flow. So some of the studies, I know the Horrocks had helped check into this earlier, and that's what this exhibit's from. Chuck had helped put that together earlier, I think in March. And it kind of shows some of the current pressures, and then he had plugged in, I think, 64 connections. 19 or 20 of those were from Kevin Duncan in the subdivision, kind of the blue dash line on top. And then there was 10 just kind of randomly at the ends of different lines, just added to the model just to see what the effects were of the growth that is being foreseen out there in the North Crescent area. And I think this one had 24 at the Duncan subdivision there on the north end. So kind of the flip note version is there's not sufficient fire flow in this area to meet state standard of 1,000 gallons per minute for 2 hours. I think it ranges from about 938 gallons per minute at the best case, and then down to 345 gallons per minute in one of the smaller 4-inch dead end lines. So that was an issue that was brought up to be able to bring that area up to the 1,000 gallons per minute. There's quite a few projects that would have to happen. There's about $2 million worth of work. Project 29 and 50 down kind of on the bottom at 1,000 North. That 4-inch line would need to be upsized to at least an 8-inch, and then an extension made to loop into the line on 1500 East. So that would have to be done, and then also another line, even up in Cedar View's area, actually, to help loop that, as well as the line right there in front of the Duncan subdivision there down on 3000 North. There's a segment of 6-inch line that would have to go up to 8-inch. So there's pretty much 4 projects there, all ranging, 200,000 to $1 million each on the bottom, and a little over $1 million, if not $2 million on project number 34. So the question was brought up, like, there's quite a bit of improvement that would have to happen to get to 1,000 gallons per minute. And I think that question was brought up, is the city required to provide fire flow outside of the city? And Grant, that's where you can correct me if I'm wrong, but the way that was looked at is outside the city where it would be a county building permit and the county process, that jurisdiction would fall on the county, and the county emergency manager, who's Mike Leffler, would make the call on whether they could do that subdivision or not. And I think there was a few requirements he would have, and I'm picking on the Duncan subdivision because they're one of them that's on the map right there, but this would go for any subdivision out there in the county. And, that would fall under him, and what we understand is that he would allow that to be built without that adequate fire flow, just notifying that those fire hydrants are not capable of producing 1,000 gallons a minute. So that's one issue that's been brought up.
2,000.
It's 1,000, for 2 hours for duration. So that's one of the things that has been looked at. It's costly to bring that up to that standard, but the city's not necessarily held. That's not a requirement for the city to provide that fire flow in areas of the county, although I'm sure that's a good goal, but it costs money, and there's many other projects in the city that could benefit from funding too.
Sorry, just a question, but if we don't provide that in any way, or is there any way the city could be liable even though the county approved it?
That's what I was looking at when it first came up. And where we're not the ones issuing the building permit, I don't see liability coming back. We can sell water for any number of reasons. It doesn't just have to be for residents, and we're only selling what we have available there. We're not promising fire flow or anything. So I see it as the building authority's issue, not the city's.
Thank you, I appreciate the clarification.
So the second question is there adequate capacity to allow these additional connections and these subdivisions that are coming forward? And on paper and by the model, the answer is yes. In fact, it's quite a large number that could be supported in this area and not drop the minimum pressure down below 40 psi. But we wouldn't necessarily recommend that you stretch the limits on that, because there is the whole situation with wheeling the water through Cedar View, that's pressure sustaining valve, and then some of those other things. So, like, for example, there's 104 connections in North Crescent right now, and based on like the peak day demand during the master plan, that was found to be almost 1,300 gallons per day, which is about 0.88 or 0.9 gallons per minute of flow. So the flow that's currently being drawn, I think the peak was around 1,300 gallons per day during a peak day demand. So that's a flow rate, not necessarily like the full flow they would take all day. That's just the peak during the day. So based on the pressures and the models, you can see in some of the scenarios that were listed there, there's like a current peak day pressure. Again, I'm going to pick on that 3000 North area in State Street. It's like 82 psi right now. And with that 64 connections, it'll drop it to 81 psi. So really 1 to 2 psi difference. There's not a lot of change there. So again, on paper and on the model, there is capacity, as long as the fire flow issue isn't part of the equation. that there is capacity to allow connections. Just knowing that there is a fire flow deficiency, and this is an area that's had problems in the past. But from what we can tell, the connection to Cedar View and that PRV is what will allow, that's helped boost some of those pressures, and the city has done some projects in the last few years too that have helped that situation up there. So I guess our recommendation, if you were to ask if we would feel that it's allowable, we would, I think in some communication we'd sent, we felt really comfortable in saying you would be able to at least do 100 connections at this point. It might be recommended to revisit that area if that does exceed that. And also just looking at where the subdivisions are planned when they do come in. And for one, like the Duncans, it might not actually be in the current water district boundary. There's probably things that need to happen to do that anyways. And also just where they land in the area. So is there anything else I needed to bring up there? Okay, great. What other questions you have?
So I have questions for staff. What are your feelings in that area? I mean, we talked about this a little bit. First of all, where does our boundary end, Roosevelt City? Does it show up even on that map?
No, we zoom out.
But this is all in Duchesne County at least.
Yes.
It is.
Mayor, one thing we did look at is the annexation boundaries.
Yep.
And they do follow about the pink line in the middle and the hill line to the right, kind of a Utah shape right there. The majority of this is within the annexation boundaries. There is some that is even outside the annexation boundaries.
Yeah, that's one of the things that
The water boundary is similar to that, but it doesn't go up as high because Cedar View's in here.
So the other question I would have is, I know when we were looking at this before, we were kind of tentatively looking at our future water plan. So we have, 50, 60 years or something like that. And looking at the Roosevelt City area, what could be developed, how much water we would need for that. I really hesitate to continue to send water outside of Roosevelt City boundaries until we know for sure what our growth looks like in the next 10, 20, 30 years, and making sure that we have adequate for our residents within our city limits.
And the needs that we have in the city limits, in town.
Yeah.
Are a lot, as far as transite line replacement and, before we did something like this, I'd like to see some of that being addressed.
As far as improvements or putting any infrastructure in up there, my personal opinion is absolutely not. It would be at the cost of the developer or water users or whoever needed the water in that area. But as far as just the water itself, especially, looking at it this year, and it is a finite resource, and we do have adequate now. But what's our growth going to look like in the next 5 to 10 years, especially if the railroad comes through? What is the developable property that we have inside city limits? And I'm sure that it wouldn't be a perfect guess, but it would be a close guess of how much water we would need just inside our city limits if it was developed. The open land was developed.
Mayor, we do have that 40-year plan. That was the one I presented a couple months ago or a month ago. As far as city limits and our boundaries were good, but getting outside our area and Cedar Views, we need to actually look at that, so.
It wasn't your 40-year presentation, the end of the 40 years, we were gonna come up a little short with the resources that we had now.
It was,
That's not including.
yeah, it was a hair short, but it was pretty close. But it's hard to predict 40 years from now too. But
Ryan, did your 40-year plan, did it include the annexation boundary or just the actual city limit boundary?
it included the annexation boundary and Cedar View, but there's sections of this that's in neither.
Not.
We're heading east.
But a lot of that growth in that area would be accounted for in our 40-year plan, as long as it was within our annexation boundary.
Correct.
Did it include the construction of a new tank, or was that just based off of the tank that we have?
Oh, it has a new tank.
So that 40-year plan had
Yeah.
that new tank, okay.
Yeah,
The
but
magenta line or the red line, is that our pipe?
yes. Yep. But
Red, red box, you know.
But the 40-year plan looks at water right and how much water we have, not necessarily our infrastructure. It's looking at what we have and enough to provide future.
It's like your water source, right?
Yeah, yes.
And that's what I'm most concerned about, as far as infrastructure and doing projects. You know, that's a totally different subject, but just water alone is what I would be looking at. Do we actually even have a resource? We can't build any infrastructure. We don't have any water to flow through, but in the 40-year plan, I can't remember, how was the population growth calculated? Do you remember?
They took the, you know what?
Was it just kind of an average? Because I
Average, it had a trending flow.
remember.
Yeah,
Because I really feel like the railroad's coming. Not only feel like it, but we're being told that the railroad's coming. And if the railroad does come, we're gonna see our population boom, and who knows, I mean, it could potentially double in the next 5 to 10 years, which is not what we're anticipating on that 40-year plan. And those are the types of things that I get a little bit nervous about. 100 connections may not be a ton. What does that equate to as far as a daily total? You were saying 13.
90 gallons a minute
yeah.
is what, in that.
90 gallons a minute, which it doesn't sound like a lot, but when you add up 90 gallons a minute, I'm guessing that's probably around an acre foot a day. A little over an acre foot a day. Does that sound about right?
Those extra 100 connections, that is going to do all of the improvements that you said.
No, that would be with no improvements.
Okay.
One thing I want to point out too, like Kirby's mentioned too, as staff, and correct me if I'm wrong, staff, please, because I don't want to be leading in the wrong direction here, but we're not just looking at this area. Our job is to look at the whole system. So to me, I'm looking at it as a oiled machine, right? You know, so there's other areas that has issues. And that's part of that master plan. So in our master plan, we do have priorities. So we're looking at everything as a big picture. Obviously, we thought storage was an issue, and that's why we're building a new tank up in Hayden, because that's what feeds all of this. And so this particular area is not high on our priority list because we have other areas that's more condensed with less quality of pipeline in the ground and tanks that are having issues too. So just to kind of give you heads up, I'm not trying to kill the project or anything like that. Don't get me wrong. It's just that's how we're looking at it, is priority in the master plan.
One of the potential problems that I see going along with what you're saying is it looks like that area is already stressed a little bit as far as somewhat. You add another 100 connections and something goes wrong, and then you have that many more people upset needing water, and then that has to become. So
Yes.
that's, I don't know, just looking at it from that point of view as well.
We can always change that number. It doesn't have to be 100, right, Eric?
Right.
75.
Like I said, on
Revisit
paper,
it and make sure.
on paper, you could sustain up to 725 connections out there if you didn't care about fire. But that's where we're thinking, well, I don't think you want to like totally deplete any fire flow you could even get out there. 100 connections would keep you, I mean, that's just about 40 more than what those numbers are saying, and so that would keep you only dropping your level of service a couple PSI for people, just in the day-to-day things.
And I guess the question would be, if we issue those connections, where do we draw the line? If somebody else comes, you know what I'm saying, where do we say, okay, that's all we're going to do? I It's really, I don't know, that's.
I think we currently have 60. You think 60? We have 60 just waiting.
Mhm.
Does that include the?
That includes
That
the
includes
subdivision, but we're sitting around 60 right now currently.
Have those 60 been approved by the county person, Mike, what's his name?
Not all of them, some of them probably, but not all.
Usually what'll happen, Councilman Roosevelt, is before they'll get approved by the county, they'll actually make the homeowner or whoever's doing the subdivision get a letter, or memorandum of understanding from the entity that's providing the water. Then once they see that, then they'll go ahead and issue the permit. So it's kind of hard to get that permit before you have an actual water.
So that's good to know. I appreciate you sharing that.
I don't know if that would be the appropriate time to just, in that will serve letter, say, yes, we'll serve you water, but no, just know that you do not have, you're in an area that has lower fire flow. I don't know when the appropriate time is to do that, but
In that letter.
that would be a good time.
And there is one other thing that hasn't come up yet, but I think you should consider, and that's that if you allow the connection, the county would be the ones deciding whether or not to issue the permits now. But then if the time comes that they want to annex in, then we kind of inherit what's already there without any leverage to have a developer to upgrade any of it. And so then it would probably end up falling on us to improve.
Another note to that, which I'm glad you said that, Grant, so I think we'd also recommend, I think everyone would, that when there's actually put in new lines that the city will inherit, that those lines be put in with minimum sizes and the infrastructure to serve fire flow when it's available.
Could we dictate that, though, as Roosevelt City, where the county's the one improving it?
Or, I mean, we could say that we're not going to supply any water up there, certain conditions are met, but I don't know, I'm sure it's not the same developer doing all of it, so it makes it hard to deal with them one at a time.
That would be something that I would like to see if we did allow it to go in. Just say it's contingent on you building the infrastructure to meet our minimum requirements. So that, they couldn't just throw in a 4-inch line. And we could have a conversation too with Mike Hutton, because he would be the one to approve those types of things over there. And just see kind of what the county requires to make sure that they're in line. And if they're in line, then we wouldn't have to have anything in addition to, but if they weren't, then we could have.
It's possible too, we could put something in the will serve letter, putting a condition in there saying we will, if line up to whatever point they're at is, it meets our fire flow standards.
The other thing, the more connections we go through, the more water we're weaving through Cedar View's line, and I know that's been a topic of frustration. Something that we really gotta get taken care of before we have connections in that area too. Just making sure that we have that understanding with them, so that we know what it's going to cost us ultimately if we do provide water there. Because right now, I don't think it's real clear. I know there's something, but I don't think it's real clear. I think it's a little bit vague in how that's working.
With Cedar View?
Yeah.
I think your, flow rate in your contract with them says a maximum flow rate of 300 gallons per minute. So I don't know how that plays into it too, but we're almost running a third of that right now. Yeah, how does that play out? But
Do you have a copy of that contract, Eric? Okay.
So Grant, go back to your annexation issue. When the city annexes, will we then be required to bring up fire flow standards at that time?
Yeah, not necessarily immediately, but we would be annexing in an area that didn't meet our own standards. And so, I mean, they would urge the city at that point to
So you were talking
stand.
$4 million to get the whole area up to fire flow standards. How much is the cost for the annexation portion when that occurs?
So like, I think the first thing that you would annex that would get, kind of fall into that would be that area just north of 1,000 north, so that project 29 and
That's the $2 million, right?
that's, yeah, I think those are both about $1 million each for that.
Dictates when we
People, we can't force annexation. It has to come from residents wanting to do that.
When they do petition for annexation, do we automatically say yes?
We don't have to. Yeah, we don't have to. I think we'd like to see more residents, especially those that are utilizing our water. We'd like to see them in Roosevelt City. That helps us with property tax and things. But it's also easier to go get funding for projects. Really hard. I don't know what the CID would do if we went to get a project outside the city. That would be an interesting.
Yeah, direct benefit to the city, to the citizens.
It would almost have to be Duchesne County. In my mind, it'd almost have to be Duchesne County that would head up that project. We could be a participant. They would be the one that has.
And I think the growth model is probably conservative on the water plan. I do think that there's a good chance a railway is gonna come in. But we also need to try and foster growth and development, in and around the city if we're going to foster other developments of economic growth. And having amenities that are more than just a bedroom community, it's a tough balance. I think putting the burden on the infrastructure with the parameters that they meet our standards is critical for the developer, and we have to be prepared to take on liability concerns when we annex. So that's a good point.
You make a good point as well, but I think there's enough opportunities for development in the city that will happen if the railroad really come through. This is kind of one that's really on the outskirts. If this was the only spot to develop for the most easily developed, I guess, or the low hanging fruit, I would say. I think this is one of those that's kind of, there's a lot of other opportunities I think we have. I'm not against it 100% either. I just, there's a lot of question marks. I would personally like to see that we get our ducks in a row between us and Cedar View and a few of these other things so that we know exactly what we're doing with, what the costs are going to be as far as milling through that line and everything else. That's the triple or even double. If we have that in line before we start issuing more connections, I think that's just even as something as simple as that, to get those things sorted out, and then the risk of having connections to that line, we already know kind of what those risks are. They're not an unknown, but there are unknowns that I think we have. Just we'll give it a guess. That's my own personal opinion. Any other thoughts from the council on that? Anyone willing to make a motion one way or the other on that?
I don't even know where to begin on a motion on this one.
I
think we need more information.
Say table it.
Yeah,
Later.
Do we have
I would
a
second that one.
Sounds like staff is leaning towards, what is your recommendation?
recommendation from staff? Consensus there?
That's why we're here.
Well, I feel like we're not
It's
far
a
enough
tough-
into
it's a
the
tough
weeds.
situation.
We feel the same as you. I feel like our job is to get the facts for you, lay it out the best that you can understand, and hopefully we can come up with a decision. However, one issue that we're, on the flip side of things, we're getting a lot of pressure from these folks one way or the other, so we need an answer sometime.
You got 60 already waiting, right?
Yeah, so they're getting a lot of pressure there. I do believe Cedar View and that's gonna take, it's not gonna be easy. I think that will take us a little bit of time there too as well, so.
I still think the mayor made a good point, sorry, that we need more information, I think, on things before we can make a decision.
The potential that I see us getting ourselves into, or the position I see is getting ourselves into is when we do add those connections, we give Cedarview a larger leveraging point at that time to, and I would just rather sort all of that stuff out before we do that and make sure that all of our T's are crossed and I's are dotted. And then we know, we can go into it eyes wide open, we know exactly what it's going to be. You know, the infrastructure again is kind of a concern. But the most concerning thing to me is just not having everything completely sorted out with Cedarview and that, and running our water through their lines, and then having more connections for that.
So other than Cedar View, what other information do you need? I kind of want Jones and DeMille to be on
It
it.
sounds like there's adequate water there, and it doesn't sound like we're going to be on the hook for liability issues if we're initially.
Until they want to annex, then
So the information that I would like to see, Ryan, is I know it's part of the 40-year plan,
Yeah, I've got that.
but how much developable land we have. We're anticipating that that's going to take in water in the next little while, and then I would like to almost throw in an equation if the railroad counts and we work, because we could potentially close to double in size in 5 or 10 years, in all honesty. And I'd like to look at those figures and just see where we're at and how that trajectory plays out in the next 30 years. And then just see if we, just so we know we have enough water and we know we're not going to get in a position where we can be leveraged.
When Kirby was bringing up, I don't know if we have that, if there's a project in the master plan, but you could run another line from, you know, highway across to somewhere in 3,000 or something. Would be in your zone, like, probably, I would not be surprised if just a line like that, if you did a 12-inch line.
Would solve all
Just
that.
one thing that really solve.
Could you get a number for us on that too, Eric? Then
Can you
just
put that in the
across from
model?
Neil Highway straight over. And you're thinking straight over from Neil Highway on 3,000 north, right?
Yeah, I don't know if that's the road or if it's the next one, somewhere across there.
Okay.
Trying to look at it before, just really preliminary, but that was options.
Could you run the hydraulics on that and get us a cost?
Just plugging that in the model would, what that would do to change those.
Because the 4-inch line on 29 and 30 and things like that wouldn't be near as factor with that larger line supply anymore.
One thing too, to add to this that is concerning is there's still just a 250,000 gallon tank feeding this whole area. So by doing this line, that actually bypasses that. So we need to just remember, you know, we've been down that road before, having a small tank on top of a system like this. So I don't know, something to consider.
That gives us direct access to the too many.
And you're not so dependent
Yeah.
on Cedar View maintaining that level in that small tank,
Mm-hmm.
because they can drop, cause us all kinds of issues, which it has in the past.
If you're wrong in some ways, city's doing Cedar View Montville a favor, like, I think that's a 10-inch line, you know.
It is.
Like their line is also a 10-inch line, but how many connections are there? If there's not 10-inch line, there's connections. So where you are taking water from that, that's definitely benefiting them by being able to keep that water fresh. That was one reason I think it was.
Excuse me. And then the other thing we talked about is swapping areas. So that we don't, because where we're not able to control the flow, we don't have control of the tank or anything else. That's where we're putting ourselves in a pretty unique position. So, well, that'll give us some more information to think about. So, Dustin, did you make the motion to? Okay, so we have a motion and a second to table it until next meeting. We have at least some information that would be helpful to make a final decision. All in favor on that motion?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. All right. Our next agenda item is, I think, the EBIC report, and we have Chad Moore here with us tonight. Thanks, Chad. Our own celebrity here in the basement.
UBIC was a great success this year. Was glad to be able to put it back in full swing. Thousands attended throughout the weekend. All the events were well attended. Thanks to the city for all your help in making this a great success. And the use of the park, the police officers. We have a few things that we'd like to address throughout the year, possibly to fix up and make it a better, safer environment for people for next year. Well, the chief of police has come up with a couple of ideas. Also, fire department's come up with a couple of ideas, and we just need to work it out and hopefully be able to work with the city and maybe we can work with, corrections and maybe get some help in. We would like to possibly put up finish up with some more small fences around the park to keep motor vehicles out of the park. Granted, we have to have some golf carts in the park for police safety, but we'd like to limit the amount of SUVs and golf carts that are coming in because they're just driving them all over the place. When you get that many people in one confined area and someone decides they're gonna go for a ride, they can get somebody hit, especially when they're 12-year-olds driving. But it was a great time. Arrest rates weren't real high. And it's a pretty safe event. It was a great time. I think everybody had a good time.
I don't know if it was because we didn't do it or it didn't happen last year or what, but I thought it was excellent this year. I mean, really
Crowds are back to normal where they were, so I was pleased with everything.
all the events that you had to. I know I participated in at least 3 different events.
Yeah.
And I know there was probably dozens more than that.
It was fun.
So,
Thanks for all your efforts.
yeah,
Great time. For all you guys' help.
That's our gratitude to all those that volunteered as well. I know there's several that help you out and you orchestrate and do a wonderful job. So
Fun time. Okay,
thanks, Chad.
thanks.
Thank you. Brett, anything you'd like to update us on?
No, not really, just, I wanna thank Chad. Chad's awesome to work with. I think everything went, pretty much went out without a hitch. Dustin Lines took care of the park, took care of the trash. We have, the inmates come from Duchesne County and do a sweep through every morning, clean up, help us out. But overall, I think it was one of the best years we've had. Softball tournaments were well attended. I think they're gonna grow every year. We got a guy there this year that wants to try to get them to grow and expand. So overall, I think it was really good. Look forward to doing it again next year. Last year we was glad it got canceled. This year we was glad it's back. Anything else?
You're about the only one.
I know, that's true. It's kind of funny, we joke about it, but it was kind of nice not to have to do it. So,
Well, it was hard canceling it too,
yeah.
because it was all planned.
Thank you, you guys.
Thanks. Chief Rockwood, do you have anything to report on that?
Fire department's fired, everybody saw Saturday night. I hope everybody enjoyed it as much as we did, but I think it went really good. Appreciate the oil companies and the city that's helped us in purchasing the equipment to make the show run more smooth and safer for each of us. We didn't have any issues. Firemen are always glad to be involved, but 7 trucks in the parade if we wanted to wash up the man. So everybody enjoys it.
All I was gonna say is, when I was on the fire department, we were still lighting with the, what do you call it? Yeah, and we didn't get to see anything because your head was down the whole time. Lighting up. You couldn't see anything, but it was really good.
Yeah, it's a great. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks.
And Chief Watkins.
Yeah. This happened to be my first one, and I was actually quite impressed. We really didn't have any issue whatsoever. We had one arrest at the whole time and one deterrent. But other than that, it went very well. I was impressed with my officers.
They look sharp, by the way.
Yeah, they did.
They stood out. It was, looked good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Real quick, going back to, this is for both Chad and Chief Watkins, but you mentioned the golf cart being a safety issue and some smaller fences or barricades to be keep that. Is there any other ideas you have to address maybe that concern? Because there are a lot of personal golf carts, I'm sure, that were up around there, some without lights, some with lights. But if they're driving where pedestrians are going to be, that could be, I see how that could be a concern.
It makes it difficult because obviously this is an open area and that's what we want it to be. Without gates or entrancy or ticket taking or anything of that sort. So other than the police interacting and shutting them down or deterring it that way, I don't know exactly another way. Also by getting the word out front. Just like we have a couple other issues that we've talked about. Minor things. If we can tackle that ahead of time, then we'll be able to deter it and come up. The carts are one that is. The UBIC is UBIC. It's an inside joke. We'll talk slower.
Take your time.
UBIC is in the city is known for its golf course. We have lots of golf courses. So it's something that I don't know if we can actually completely overcome. We did have a few issues with some four-wheelers and some ATVs and some vehicles coming in where there shouldn't be. I think we can get around that. I'm pretty positive we can. But golf carts is going to be a little bit of a challenge.
Maybe if we do maybe a media post on our Facebook before the next UBIC saying, you know, no golf carts, UTVs, ATVs allowed on the grass at Constitution Park.
Yeah, are there any signs up there at all?
No, but it's a daily, we're kicking them off daily.
Yeah. I was gonna say the other thing during UBIC, but if it's a daily thing, that doesn't really work out. They make that safety fence, that plastic, you just roll it out in 150-foot rolls or whatever, and it's just, but that's kind of a little bit labor intensive for that event, but it's it's something we can do.
You're saying that's a daily issue with
With golf carts, kids on, and they're kids, they're just, yeah, it's, and not four-wheelers or side-by-sides as much. There is a few side-by-sides we kicked off too.
Do kids need to be 16 to operate a golf cart?
Not
They've never really mattered in Roosevelt, has it?
Limitation ATVs, carts, it wouldn't, because you have to have so many CCs and that's a different type of control system. So there's a gray area.
I feel like we can get the word out, like you said, and then maybe have some courtesy carts for the older people. And I don't necessarily want to tie it with cops, you know, we could get some volunteers.
We had a lot of officers running courtesy back and forth.
Yeah.
We can find 4 or
And I
5.
think that is a great PR thing. Really, but we can put a Chiefs golf cart with lights and sirens next year. We'll talk about it. Yes. I had one officer driving me around like Miss Daisy. It was kind of advantage of me.
Yeah, mid julep and away you go.
But anyway, and then like I said, there's a couple other things we'll address. And if we get it ahead of time, or no problem. But basically, it's very minimal.
Well, we appreciate you guys and
Yeah.
the show you put on.
Very good. All right. Hal,
No, you're not.
Thanks for coming.
Yeah.
Mr. Bake, you have anything for us tonight?
Just a couple of quick things. Maybe council, if you'll notice in your packet, you do have a memo with the Crescent Point discussion. That'll be a new thing that staff will be doing. The reason behind those memos are to help council and the public to get a summary of what we're talking about, some of the things that we've discussed in-house. So you will be starting to get memos with everything that's coming to council from staff that have reviewed those things. Again, it'll be an executive summary, a one-sentence summary, and the idea behind that is to help members of council, help the public, help the media, just help be more transparent in what's going on, what we're discussing, and just be a tool to help city council in these meetings. So that's the idea behind those memos. The other two things I want to mention briefly are we have replaced our PIO. We do now have Sunshine Mello. She'll be here next council meeting. She's fantastic. We're very excited to have her. Her first day as a full-time employee will be Thursday, so she'll be at our next council meeting. And we do have our intern that just started this week as well, Lorenzo. He's been phenomenal as well. I want to thank Councilman Busenbark for helping us with that. It's been really exciting to have him on board and doing a lot of these research projects and helping us out. So things here at the city have been moving along really well, and we're excited with the way they're going. Any questions for me?
Do you have a comment?
Oh, I was just gonna say, I like that, and I love that it's, the staff recommendation is public record, on the agenda packet. That does go to everybody, right? Like,
Yes, that'll be in the packet.
love that. Appreciate
And
it.
those memos will be reviewed by department heads as well, so regardless of who submits it, there'll be multiple layers reviewing that before it gets to council.
Great idea.
The only other question I have is, we talked about justserve.org, when we have our department head meetings, making sure that any service projects that we have for the city, we communicate those and then we get them up on justserve.org. And the reason for that, just to bring it up to the council, I'm sure you councils get hit up just like I do, with scout groups or youth groups saying, hey, do you have service projects that we can do? And I don't know. But if we could communicate those in our department meetings, or they've committed to justserve.org, and then we can just point people to that. And if we start utilizing that tool, I think that would be very helpful.
That'd be great to see.
Maybe just about that.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Councilman Busenbark, do you have anything for us tonight?
I don't.
Councilman White?
A couple of things. You may have got an email from Josh about a survey. Yesterday in ULCT board meeting, we talked quite extensively about housing and incentives and going away from incentivizing commercial to incentivizing housing, possibly changing sales tax distribution, the way they share that with cities, to try to put that burden on property taxes, things like that. But as ULCT staff has reviewed a lot of the things that have been proposed in that, it doesn't really show that some of the things the legislature wants to do. It doesn't show that it's going to accomplish what they want it to. And some of the distributions in sales tax, if they change the 50-50 model, there's some cities that are going to lose big, some that are going to gain. They don't want to be in that situation of creating winners and losers. So I would recommend you get with maybe Josh when you fill out that survey, because it says in the instructions, if you're not sure, to leave it blank. I went through it after I sent it to Josh, and there were a lot of them that I wasn't sure about, and I went ahead and marked what I felt worked best, but I could have screwed a couple of them up. So look in your email for that, and the reasoning for that survey is just so that the league can get input from all of the cities, and then that will steer what they lobby for or against, and try to make things so that everybody stays at least whole and doesn't get in a win-lose situation.
Councilman, if I may, just to show the importance of the survey, one of the questions in there is they want to tie our B and C road funds, actually penalize the city with our B and C road funds if we don't have enough affordable housing. Those two items really aren't correlated, but that's some of the approaches that are being taken right now. Very important that we in rural Utah get together and we make our voice known through these legislative processes. Because this would really impact us greatly when there's so much support and people on Wasatch Front. We need to make our voices known. Please take that, sir.
There was one other item that I had written down. Another thing that we talked about fairly extensively was the homelessness issue that we have. And not every city in the state deals with that the same. Wayne Niederhauser has been asked by the governor to head up a task force on this. So now there is a state agency that is over trying to help this situation. One interesting statistic that he said is the government housing program works for 95% of these people. And so all these people the majority of the people that end up homeless on the street, they're the ones that are hard to deal with, that can't make a government housing type situation work. They're either too rowdy or won't follow the rules or whatever. And so that was interesting to me because really the majority of people that fall into a situation where they could be homeless are taken care of already by the state. That 5% makes up still a big problem, big something. So what they're trying to do is figure out a way that even if our city doesn't have to deal with homelessness, we don't have a shelter, or we don't have a program, there probably will be something coming down the line where we will contribute to a fund that helps. And they've got the state divided up into geographical areas. So we would contribute somehow to a fund that would go maybe wherever the closest homeless shelter is, and it would help them so that it didn't all have to come out of that one particular city's budget. And they have grants and they have different types of things, but they're still working on that. But that's just something they're trying to figure out, and we need to be just aware that there may be something coming.
Just a thought, and I'm sure Kim Dieter knows some of the legislation that's being looked at, but maybe getting with her, she's over the homeless. There's no homeless shelter, but she's over the homeless program in our area, and they do a fantastic job, actually, doing exactly what you said.
Wayne has been going out to each of the areas, and he said he'll be coming out to Vernal in the near future, so I'm sure she's one that we will meet with.
Anything else?
That should do it.
Thanks, Councilman White. Councilman Bear, do you have anything?
I don't have anything in particular, but I did want to bring up something, just real quick, we can openly just discuss it for a second. Mainly I want to just see what the feeling is of the council. We've in the past, we passed an ordinance for administration to allow term limits in our city, and we've got term limits right now set, but it could be overturned by the council, and I feel like it would be nice if we could implement term limits that would have to be overturned by a vote from the people. Is there a way to do that, Grant? Just curious.
Yeah, I haven't used that process before though, so I have to look at it and be able to really explain to you what has to happen.
Okay. How does it, I mean, this isn't a motion, but is there anyone that's particularly against doing that? We've already voted on, can I even ask that question?
Well, you can ask the question.
It almost seems like, getting a.
My personal opinion is along the lines of, I know you and I have talked about this, the fear is we put the tournaments in place. Any council could come in at any time and change that. It means nothing. And making it a more sure and final decision that could only be overturned by a majority vote of the taxpayers I would like to see it on a ballot, just with that type of a decision on a ballot. So is that kind of what you're
Yeah,
thinking?
especially where we have potential growth coming up in the future. I just like to keep it good, I don't know if that would.
I haven't used the referendum process for something like this, so I'll take a look at it and we'll follow up.
Okay. All right. I just, is this worth, I guess that would have to be on the agenda to ask the council if it's worth working on, right? I mean, I could go down personally and have them work on
The issue, looking at the options of what it takes.
All right.
Discussing it further, put it on the agenda.
it. Okay. All right, thanks. That was just the only thing I thought I'd bring up, but appreciate your time.
Thanks, Councilman Baird. I don't really have anything. We haven't heard anything from there's Eric. Have you heard anything from Gary on
No, other than they're just trying to get, like that email he sent, to get reply finally that they're just working through the funding that they have available and how much they can allocate to the Roosevelt shooting range.
okay.
Nothing yet.
I didn't see a deadline or anything on that either, on that decision. So we're still kind of up in the air on that. We do have a couple other projects that we're looking at. We had mentioned the softball tournaments and making those better, and hopefully we'll get some softball fields. I know we're looking at funding for those types of things. Nature Park is another one, but quite a few projects in the works. We're just waiting for money to fall. And it's not working real well right now, but we're still keeping our fingers crossed. Councilman.
Nothing to report on because I'm not sure what committees I'm on.
Yeah.
I think I'm on the airport one, but I don't know when it meets. So if I can get some information on that, I'm happy to sit in, or if you want to readjust some committees to align with.
I still need to do that, so.
No, nothing to report.
Councilman Adams?
I don't have anything today.
Did the Parks and Rec meet on the 12th?
I would,
They met and there was me and one other person.
Did.
We knew there was gonna be a few missing, but
That was the week of wasn't that Duchesne County Fair too?
yeah.
Yeah, so it's just August is not a good.
We talked a little bit about maybe going quarterly, having the groups meet individually monthly and then going to maybe a quarterly big meeting.
Gotcha. Okay. If nothing else, we'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Make that motion.
Second it.
Okay, all in favor? Aye. Any opposed?